What remains of Edith Finch? Well, an evocative, long-in-development narrative experience with an air of mystery and a beautiful presentation, provided you're playing on a PC. So what remains of the PlayStation 4 version? Well, let's just say it's a little unexpected, but we'll get to that in a moment. The game itself is the second release from Giant Sparrow, the company responsible for the unfinished Swan, released back in 2012. Edith Finch was first announced then at the PlayStation Experience back in 2014 with Sony Santa Monica as its publisher, but since then, the game has changed hands and is now published by Annapurna Interactive, the new games division of the film production company Annapurna Pictures. And after playing the game, the pairing starts to make a lot of sense. This is an interactive story in the style of something like Gone Home or The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, but even with those comparisons, the game still manages to upend expectations in some interesting ways.
All my stomach started growling.
Now, it starts by dropping the players in the forest just outside of a mysterious house, but eventually sends you down a spiral of madness that leads to some interesting places. Just to highlight one early section, as a teaser at least, you can expect the game to go from this to this. But as a cinematic experience, the presentation here is critical in grabbing the attention of its players. A poor frame rate or other problems could spoil the fun. And thus far, we've been looking at the PC version of the game, which is why it's running so smoothly. But what about the PlayStation 4? After all, with Sony Santa Monica originally looking to publish the game, it was likely going to be a PS4 exclusive. Now, to start with, the game runs at 1080p on both the PlayStation 4 and the PS4 Pro, but thanks to Unreal Engine's very aggressive but nice temporal anti-aliasing, it does appear very clean on both. On the PC then, we've run across complaints suggesting that the game is limited to 1080p, but that's not true in our experience. We've had no problems reaching higher resolutions on our test machine, both in borderless window and full screen mode. The game even includes a resolution scaling option for those that want to maintain native resolution while leaving the scaling up to the game. That said, with the heavy use of chromatic aberration and the rather soft anti-aliasing, it can give the impression of running at a lower resolution, even when pixel counts suggest otherwise. Comparing the two, we see that the PlayStation 4 version compares reasonably favorably, but suffers from some more noticeable pop-in issues at points. Look at the mountain here early on to see what I'm talking about. Shadows on the PC are also rather different, with a softer, more diffused variety, which is more natural in this forested environment, while on PlayStation 4 all of the shadows appear sharper and harder. But really, the visual makeup here is not the issue. There are 3 performance-related problems here that need to be discussed when talking about the PlayStation 4 version. We started off on the PS4 Pro then, and at first glance we wondered if the game supported the Pro at all. It looks like a standard 1080p presentation, and performance wasn't really amazing. Once we bring up the frame time graph though, it all starts to become clear. There are 2 things happening here on the PS4 Pro. The first thing we see is stuttering, related to asset streaming. This isn't entirely unexpected and wouldn't be a huge deal on its own, but it's definitely noticeable at points. The second issue, and the more significant one here though, is, you guessed it, bad frame pacing. In a game where you are constantly moving and rotating the camera in a rather slow but even manner, it really doesn't feel great. The game is very jittery at points on the PS4 Pro as a result. Those rare moments when the frame pacing is even give us a taste of what could be, but more often than not, it's pretty jittery. It's a shame too, as if not for this issue, the game would be turning in a very stable 30 frames per second, which is pretty adequate for a game like this. Still, the nature of this problem certainly suggests that this is something a patch could fix in the future. At least we hope so. The streaming stutters aren't great either, but much easier to overlook overall. Of course, at this point, we still weren't even sure that the game actually supported the PlayStation 4 Pro, so I disabled the boost mode feature and ran the test again. The results were the same. Okay, so either boost mode does nothing, or it's a native Pro game after all. But if it's limited to 1080p and the frame rate is somewhat stable then, how do we know that it's a Pro game? Well, simple. We loaded it up on a base PlayStation 4 and things didn't go quite so well for the older system. This is the third performance issue I mentioned earlier, and it's far and away the most significant. To put it simply, the game does not run well on a standard PlayStation 4. We see the frame rate spend a great deal of time below 30 frames per second, often averaging around 25 frames per second in these open areas. In some spots it drops even further, which is a shame here as the standard PlayStation 4 might be where the game would find its largest audience, but clearly this version of the game just isn't up to snuff. Now, once you step indoors, things do improve, and we get much closer to hitting the steady 30 frames per second we're looking for here, but the bad frame pacing continues to rear its head. Combine that with small drops below the 30 FPS line, and the game just winds up feeling a lot less fluid than it should. In some instances, we even ran into massive loading pauses like this, which we'd never encountered on the PS4 Pro. When you combine a low average frame rate with bad frame pacing, streaming stutters, and massive loading pauses like this, the result just isn't good enough, and it ends up detracting from the story that the team is trying to tell here. That said, a fix for the bad frame pacing issue would be a tremendous help here. The PS4 Pro version could then deliver a steady 30 frames per second, while the standard PS4 experience would at least feel more stable overall, at least in situations when it's not dropping below 30. If you have the option though, the PC version is where it's at. From start to finish, we had zero issues running the game on a GTX 980 Ti running at 1440p. The game turned in a nice stable 60 frames per second and felt great to play. When bumping the resolution all the way up to 4K, however, we did need to lower the resolution setting to medium or knock down some of the details in order to maintain a smooth frame rate. Still, the game is quite tweakable, and as an Unreal Engine 4 title, you can go in expecting good performance here on the PC, provided you have a capable GPU to back it up. And it really is a beautiful game when you have the hardware. The use of subtle indirect lighting and a beautiful color palette really help build a world that you simply want to explore. As the game jumps between the different scenarios and different characters, the look and tone change accordingly. There's just a ton of variety here, and the game makes great use of its technology. I've already highlighted a few things earlier that were really cool, but I don't want to spoil anything else. Just go in expecting something rather interesting, I'll say that much. And I really do think it's worth checking the game out. I had a very difficult time putting it down for coverage here. It is certainly one of the most engaging games of this type that I've played in quite some time. The main issue here remains simple, the PlayStation 4 version of the game. If you have a PlayStation 4 Pro and can look past the frame pacing issues, you'll still certainly be able to enjoy the story being told, but on a standard PlayStation 4, the game definitely needs some work. For such a tightly woven tale, these technical issues really stick out. Whether you can put up with them or not, that's a matter of opinion. But that's all we have for now. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe and follow us on Twitter. And until next time, this is John signing off.